Hey, welcome to Left Right Out. I was trying to get this on a podcast as well, but I'm having some issues there doing this. But anyway, we'll get some of these on there just to give an alternative way of getting a hold of some material. But anyway, there's some interesting stuff going on. We've all been paying attention to. I'd like to touch once again on the repo markets. If you're not familiar with that, the Federal Reserve has had to go in there, and they're still, I think they still have their window open for the repurchasing, or to step into the repo market until October 10th, I believe. But the significance of that goes back to the short end of the curve and overnight lending between commercial banks and investment banks. If you're not familiar with the repo market, I know it's been in the news a little bit, but there's been a lot of misconceptions about it. It's actually kind of what your money market money is. When you have your funds in a bank account in a money market fund, some of those are used, but it's investment banks and other institutions of the sort, they need sometimes to have reserves at a certain level, and they overnight lend to certain commercial banks, and there's usually an intermediary in there, which I believe is JP Morgan is one of them for sure, and I think there's another bank, but JP Morgan's the one that the Fed's kind of gone in there and bailed out, because they're the ones that are supposed to make that market, or there's a couple of banks in there that make that market. They kind of look for borrowers, they know who needs the money, and then they kind of facilitate who has the money available. And there's been a couple times people say, well, there's a liquidity shortage. Well, there's liquidity, but it's what the lenders are willing to accept as collateral, and what they're willing to give the money that they have, a rate of interest, and they're spiked up to like 10%. I think. I mean, there's some debate about that. It looked like on the charts that I've seen, it went up to like 6, maybe 8% or something like that. We don't get a whole lot of the details as a public. What you need to know is that, there was a definite spike, and to me, it was the market kind of telling you what the real rate of interest is, or the collateral. I mean, there's a couple ways to look at it. Either people are seeing through the facade and the real rate of interest on some of these, either the institution itself, what it looks like financially, they see that and they don't want to give their money. They value that risk at a certain rate of interest, or maybe it's the collateral that they were, which is usually short-term treasuries they throw up there as collateral, or MBS, mortgage-backed securities. So if that institution looks at those and doesn't and wants a better return for the risk, they hold it just overnight or maybe a couple days. There's a lot of things to think about there. Just worries that it really scares the devil out of me, I'll tell you that. Understanding it a little bit more than the average Joe, this is the canary in the coal mine. Might not be immediate, but this is definitely a sign of weakness that the Fed and these other central bankers can't really control. That there is actually a market. They have to step in even more. I mean, once you become the market, then you have to buy everything, because that's what it's getting down to. So they're in there, and they're actually, people are saying they're injecting liquidity. They are injecting liquidity, but what it is hopefully, it's just they're taking the collateral, and then they'll give it back, and then they'll take that liquidity back out. But the more nefarious thing is if that liquidity stays in the system, and there's just more money floating out there. Granted, it's not getting down to us, so we're not really feeling it as of yet. But and a lot of the inflation we haven't really felt because of they've exported it. We were getting these cheap goods from China, which that whole dynamic might be changing. I mean, with this whole war, I mean, China's sitting on $4 trillion worth of dollar, denominated assets, whether that be actually reserves or treasuries or something like that. I think that was a number. It's almost the equivalent of the Federal Reserve balance sheet itself. So we've actually exported a lot of our inflation overseas. We're not seeing that, so we're getting these cheap goods and pushing these dollars out further, but those dollars will come in eventually. That's when we really feel it. But anyway, back to that repo market. So the Federal Reserve still has their window up, and they're doing short-term purchases of treasuries and mortgage-backed securities to keep liquidity in some of these banking institutions, which you think, after the bailouts and all, the Fed expanding its balance sheet to the point of where it is, and with less institutions since the collapse, you'd think that there wouldn't be an issue. It means that, to me, they're overextended. I don't know what, the reserve requirements are, or what's going. I think it's like 5% reserves, but man, you think about that, that's a lot of overextension. That, or there's some people are saying the tax issue that could play a little part of it, but that's still, that's happens every year. Maybe the overissuance of treasury notes and bills or I guess they're just treasuries in general. We're so indebted that the capital markets are being squeezed out by government debt. That could be part of it, but that might, with the overwhelming amount of government debt going to the market, people putting money into that and then using those treasuries to get cash reserves. Maybe there's so many of them out there. Maybe they're valuing the risk as not just what the typical yield is on those notes, bills, and bonds. So they want higher rates of interest. There's a lot. It's a complicated. It's more complicated than it should be, but it's something that it's a central banker's wet dream, what I like to say. But it's one of those things. It's like when the music stops, who's going to have a seat and who's not going to have a seat, and what's going to mean for the rest of us. I don't know. It's crazy out there. That's one thing, because that's big picture, financial system, and to me, that's the central node of what's wrong with our nation in general. But then we can go down to some domestic policy. We'll get into a little bit of that. I don't know what happened in the House with the gun bill, but I was, looking into it a little bit, and I was listening to some other people. There's some good people, if you want to get knowledge on a lot of the issues on the finance thing, go back to that. There's, Tom Woods and a lot of these Austrians. They're really good sources of information to really understand what's going on. But anyway, back to the gun thing. I can't believe that what was in that bill. They're actually naming like companies, specific brands of AR-15s and AKs and pistols. One of them I'm trying to get. It's like a Black Range ordinance. I purchased one for a significant other a long time ago, and it was really awesome. And I've really wanted to get one for myself. And I haven't had an AR for a little while, and I sold one to one of my Marines a few years back, and then I just have a sidearm and a nice hunting rifle. But I'm looking at getting an AR, and that was one of them. It's right in the bill. Some of these other things are pretty asinine, but the bill is so vague, and it's vague yet specific about certain firearms. And we're going to be down to bold actions, and if that bill passed the way it is, and so it's imperative that our senators, especially, the Congress. God, I was listening to something. The way it's a goat show. It reminds me of the Roman Empire. You almost wish Trump would pull like I think it was Caligula, or maybe not Caligula. Who was it? Put the horse in there. it might as well be the same thing. It's ridiculous, but they do make policy, and you wonder who's really running the thing. I have a little experience up there with some of these folks, and when I went to a CPAC convention, and if you haven't known, I ran for office for 2012 or something. I never made it through the primaries, but having that around, that stature, not really stature, but that was on my name, and being at the CPAC convention in 1 year, and then being a Marine officer, and being around there, I got to see some of this crap, and it's just what I didn't realize is how close everybody is. Like some of the staffers, it doesn't matter if you got R&D team, but that's almost like you click the switch, and when the camera's on, hey, there's a lot of them that staffers hang out together. I don't think it's as much as it used to be, but they were like playing the same ball game. The staffers and all those guys would vacation together. It was pretty insane what I seen, or what was told to me. I was like, I thought you guys were all enemies. Turns out you guys are all on the same team. You just pander to different aspects of society, I guess. But I think it's a little different now. You actually have a significantly socialistic branch of politics that's come into the scene, and not to say that on the other side there's not an element of that. But I think there's a lot more straight people that are on the up and up on that on the R team Granted, there's a lot of crooked ones as well, but there's in general, it seems like there's a there. I guess I'd have to go R if I had to pick, but I'm a libertarian, so it's a little difficult to look past that. I see through the facade of the system. Anyway, on the gun issue, to me, that's pivotal. I was just thinking earlier, it's like, man, the Second Amendment. All these people, I'm pro Second Amendment. You know what? I'm pro Second Amendment too, but it's not for the same reasons that most people are. I don't think we are given the right to have firearms from our government. I think we already have it. I think if we look at the Second Amendment, to me, that's stopping the government from infringing on that right that's already there. So any type of legislation, especially this one going through Congress, any type of legislation of the sort that's going in there, it's actually counter the amendment to the Constitution in general. And to me, there should be some way of prosecuting these people even putting up crap that's knowingly unconstitutional. I mean, that's just a personal rant, but that's the intention of that. If they want to change that, put an amendment through constitutionally through, what are the 2/3 of the states and through Congress and whatnot, you could put the amendment through, or convention of states or something like that. You can do it that way, do it the right way, instead of enacting bills and whatnot that, to me, that's unconstitutional, especially when you're something that's inert. But I guess they passed the Federal Reserve Act too, went off the gold standard and all that jazz, and that's it directly in there. And who knows? That's another thing. I never get that. It's like, how people have not challenged that. How's that not challenged? That affects everybody. How are we not on a gold or silver standard? I think it explicitly says it in there that Congress is supposed to, the value of and should be based on gold or silver. But I guess I'm left right out on that one, because nobody cares about that crap anymore up there. So we're living interesting times. We're past we're post-constitutional whatever empire. Not even a republic. I wish make America a republic again. That'd be awesome. We're just a expanding empire on our last vestiges of greatness, unfortunately. To me, it started with central banking and that fiat currency, and that goes down into our social ills of probably the greatest travesty of mankind, the single parenthood, which we can get into that some other time, but that's the statistics. If you look into the family in America, what's happening to us all, it's pretty damn alarming and depressing. Anyway, I better get going, because I got some things to do, and this is running a little long, so